I never thought my own mother would call me trashy, but here I was standing in my kitchen holding the phone with shaking hands as her words cut through me like broken glass. 3 weeks before Madison's engagement party, Mom told me I couldn't attend because my tattoos, my motorcycle, and my job as a mechanic would embarrass our family in front of the wealthy Whitman clan. The $10,000 I'd saved for months to help fund Madison's dream celebration suddenly felt worthless in my hands. What made this betrayal even more devastating was learning this wasn't just an engagement party at all. The drive to my childhood home felt like traveling through a nightmare. Every familiar street corner reminded me of happier times when family meant unconditional love and acceptance. I pushed through the front door without knocking something I hadn't done since high school and found Madison in her old bedroom surrounded by stacks of cream-colored envelopes. Wedding invitations. Not engagement party invitations, wedding invitations. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the elegant cards reading the formal script that announced Madison Sarah Collins would be marrying Richard James Whitman Jr. in exactly 21 days. The ceremony location was listed as the Whitman family estate, with reception to follow at their private country club. "Brisa, I can explain." Madison whispered, her face pale as morning frost. "Explain what exactly that you've been lying to me for months while I handed over my life savings for a party that doesn't exist." My voice cracked with each word. Mom appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands like she always did when caught in wrongdoing. "Sweetheart, we were going to tell you eventually. Tell me what that my own sister is getting married and I'm not invited, that I've been funding a wedding, I'm banned from attending." Madison burst into tears, mascara streaming down her cheeks in dark rivers. "I wanted you there, Brisa. I swear I did. But Richard's family, they have certain expectations. His mother, Eleanor, made it very clear that appearances matter tremendously for their social standing. So, my appearance matters more than our relationship as sisters? You don't understand the pressure I'm under," Madison sobbed. "Richard's family has connections everywhere. His father owns half the commercial real estate downtown. They could destroy my career, my future, everything I've worked for." Mom stepped forward, placing herself between us like a referee. "Brisa, honey, this isn't about not loving you. It's about Madison's happiness and security. The Whitmans are old money established families. They have traditions and ways of doing things." I felt my heart shattering into pieces. "And I don't fit those traditions." "Your motorcycle, the tattoos on your arms, your job at the garage." Mom listed each item like evidence in a criminal trial. "These people live differently than we do. They expect certain standards. Standards that apparently my own family doesn't think I meet." Madison wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I've been planning this for 8 months, Brisa. Every detail has been coordinated with Eleanor Whitman personally. The flowers, the music, the guest list, everything has to be perfect. Perfect enough that you need my money but not my presence." The silence stretched between us like an unbridgeable canyon. I looked around the bedroom where Madison and I had shared secrets, dreams, and sisterly bonds for decades. Photos of us together covered the dresser memories of camping trips, graduations, and family holidays. None of that seemed to matter anymore. "I contributed $10,000 to fund your dream wedding that I'm not allowed to attend," I said slowly. "Do you understand how that makes me feel?" "The money was a gift," Mom interjected quickly. "You said it was a gift for your sister's happiness." I thought I was contributing to an engagement party where I'd be celebrating alongside my family. I had no idea I was paying for my own exclusion. Madison's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Brisa, there's something else you need to know." My stomach dropped. What else could there possibly be? "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. Everything suddenly made terrible sense. The rushed engagement, the elaborate wedding, the desperate need for acceptance from Richard's wealthy family. "How far along?" I asked. 10 weeks. "Does Richard know?" "Of course he knows. Why do you think we're moving so fast with everything?" I sank onto Madison's childhood bed, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. My sister wasn't just choosing a husband over family loyalty, she was choosing survival and security for her unborn child. I need this marriage to work, Brisa. Madison continued, her voice breaking. I need Richard's family to accept me completely. I can't afford to have anything go wrong. Even if that means sacrificing your relationship with me, I'm not sacrificing anything permanently. Once I'm established as part of their family, once the baby comes and everything settles down, we can figure out how to include you more in our lives. But for now, I'm an embarrassment that needs to be hidden away. Mom sat down beside me, reaching for my hand. Brisa, you have to understand Madison's position. She's young, she's pregnant, and she's trying to secure the best possible future for her child. Sometimes that requires making difficult choices. I pulled my hand away. Difficult choices that involve taking my money while excluding me from the celebration it's funding. We never asked you to contribute, Madison said defensively. But you accepted it gladly enough. You accepted it knowing you had no intention of including me in the actual ceremony. The weight of betrayal settled over me like a suffocating blanket. These weren't strangers treating me badly. This was my own family choosing social status over blood loyalty. I need to think about all of this, I said, standing up slowly. What does that mean? Mom asked nervously. It means I need time to process that my family considers me too trashy to associate with wealthy people, despite being willing to take my hard-earned money. As I headed toward the door, Madison called out desperately, Brisa, please don't do anything to ruin this for me, please. I turned back to look at her one final time, seeing fear and desperation in her eyes, rather than love or regret. I'm not the one who's ruined anything here, Madison. Driving home from that devastating confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up about this whole situation. Madison had always been independent and strong-willed. The frightened, desperate woman I'd just encountered seemed like a stranger wearing my sister's face. Back at my apartment, I opened my laptop and started researching the Whitman family. If they were going to judge me without ever meeting me, I figured I should at least learn who exactly was passing judgment. Richard James Whitman Sr. appeared first in the search results. The man owned Whitman Properties, a commercial real estate empire spanning 3 states. His portfolio included office buildings, shopping centers, and luxury residential developments. News articles described him as a significant donor to political campaigns and various charitable organizations. Eleanor Whitman's social media presence painted her as the perfect society wife. Photos showed her at charity galas, art museum fundraisers, and exclusive country club events. Every image featured designer clothing and carefully posed smiles, surrounded by other wealthy women. But it was Richard Jr. who really caught my attention. At 29 years old, he appeared to live off his family's wealth without any clear career or responsibilities. His social media showed expensive vacations, luxury cars, and constant appearances at exclusive social events. What struck me as odd was how few genuine friends seemed to appear consistently in his photos. Digging deeper into public records, I found more troubling information. Whitman Properties had faced multiple lawsuits over the past 5 years. Former employees had filed complaints about workplace harassment, unpaid wages, and unsafe working conditions. Most cases were settled out of court with confidentiality agreements, but the pattern was disturbing. I found myself particularly bothered by a lawsuit filed by Maria Gonzalez, a former cleaning supervisor at one of their office buildings. Her complaint described being fired after requesting proper safety equipment for her staff. According to court documents, Richard Sr. had personally called her replaceable and suggested she should be grateful for any employment at all. The more I researched, the clearer it became that the Whitman family viewed working-class people as completely disposable. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. Carmen Rodriguez, my best friend since high school, was calling from her office at the private investigation firm where she worked. "Hey girl, you sound terrible. What's going on?" I filled Carmen in on the entire situation, from the devastating phone call to the wedding discovery to my research findings. "Hold up," Carmen said. "You're telling me your family took your money for a wedding you're not invited to attend. Basically, yes. And this is because some rich family thinks you're too trashy for their social circle. According to my own mother, my tattoos and my job make me an embarrassment. Carmen was quiet for a moment. Brisa, this whole thing smells fishy to me. In my experience, when people get this desperate about impressing wealthy families, there's usually more to the story. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we should take a closer look at Richard Whitman Jr. If your sister is rushing into marriage with someone from old money, we should make sure he's actually worth the sacrifice she's making. The idea intrigued me. You think there might be something wrong with him? I think anytime someone demands that their partner cut ties with family members, it raises red flags, especially when money is involved. After hanging up with Carmen, I decided to take a more direct approach to my investigation. If I was going to be judged by these people, I wanted to see firsthand what kind of character they possessed. The next morning, I dressed in my most professional clothing and drove downtown to the Whitman Properties office building. The lobby was all marble and brass with abstract artwork that probably cost more than I made in a year. I approached the reception desk with a story I'd rehearsed. "Good morning. I'm interested in speaking with someone about commercial rental properties. I represent a small business looking to expand." The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, directed me to the 15th floor, where Richard Jr. maintained his office. Richard's assistant scheduled me for a 15-minute consultation that afternoon. I spent the intervening time researching commercial rental rates and preparing questions that would sound legitimate. When I returned that afternoon, Richard Jr. greeted me with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He was conventionally handsome in the way that expensive grooming and dental work could create, but something about his demeanor immediately put me on edge. "Miss Collins, I understand you're interested in our premium commercial spaces." I explained my fictional business needs while observing his behavior carefully. Within minutes, his true character began showing through. When his assistant brought coffee, Richard didn't acknowledge her presence or say thank you. When she accidentally bumped his desk while setting down the cup, he shot her a look of pure irritation. A maintenance worker appeared to fix a problem with the window blinds. Richard treated the man like he was completely invisible, continuing our conversation as if no one else existed in the room. The thing about commercial real estate, Richard was saying, is that it's all about understanding the right kind of clientele. We're very selective about who we allow in our buildings. What do you mean by the right kind of clientele? Professional businesses, established companies with proper credentials and references. We can't have just anyone representing our properties. His phone buzzed with a text message, and he glanced at it quickly. "Actually, speaking of credentials, I'll need to see your business license, tax documents, and financial statements before we proceed further." I didn't have any of those things, obviously, but I tried to buy more time. "Of course. What kind of deposit would be required for a space?" "That depends entirely on the tenant's background and financial stability. We conduct thorough investigations of all potential renters." As he spoke, his phone rang. He answered without excusing himself from our meeting. "What do you mean the contractor is asking for more money?" He snapped into the phone. "I don't care what problems they're having. They agreed to a price, and that's what they'll get paid." I could hear the contractor's voice through the phone explaining some kind of material cost increase. "Listen carefully," Richard said, his voice turning cold. "You'll complete the work for the agreed price or you won't get paid at all, and I'll make sure you never work on another Whitman property again." The contractor tried to explain further, but Richard cut him off. "I don't care if your workers quit. Find new workers. I don't care if your suppliers are charging more. Find new suppliers. What I care about is that you honor your agreement and stop trying to squeeze more money out of us." He hung up without saying goodbye and turned back to me as if nothing had happened. "Sorry about that. You have to be firm with these people or they'll walk all over you." "These people?" "Contractors, workers, service providers. They're always looking for ways to take advantage of successful businesses." I felt sick listening to how casually he dismissed the financial struggles of working people. This was the man my sister was so desperate to marry. "Well," I said, gathering my purse, I should probably get those documents together and get back to you. Of course. Though I should mention, given the caliber of our buildings, we do prefer tenants who fit a certain profile. Professional appearance, established business relationships, that sort of thing. He looked me up and down as he said this, and I realized he was already judging me based on my appearance, just like his family had judged me without ever meeting me. As I waited for the elevator, I could hear Richard on another phone call through his open office door. "Madison, sweetheart, everything is proceeding perfectly for the wedding. Mother is handling all the final details with your family." My blood went cold hearing him mention Madison. No, don't worry about your sister. That situation has been handled appropriately. We can't have any disruptions to such an important event." The elevator arrived, but I hesitated, straining to hear more of the conversation. "Trust me, darling, after we're married and settled, we can revisit family dynamics. But for now, we need to focus on making the right impression with all the important people who'll be attending." As the elevator doors closed, I heard him say something that made my stomach drop. "Besides, this whole arrangement is temporary anyway. Once everything is properly secured, we can make adjustments as needed." What did he mean by temporary arrangement? That evening, I spread all my financial documents across my kitchen table, determined to understand exactly how my money was being used for Madison's wedding. The bank statements, canceled checks, and receipts told a story that was far different from what I'd been led to believe. My initial $10,000 contribution hadn't been a small part of a larger budget funded primarily by the wealthy Whitman family. It was, in fact, the cornerstone of the entire wedding funding. The florist deposit $3,000 from my account. The catering down payment $4,200 from my account. The photographer's retainer $1,800 from my account. Madison's wedding dress and alterations $950 from my account. Even the decorations and centerpieces had been paid for with my savings. I called the florist first, identifying myself as Brisa Collins and explaining that I needed to verify payment arrangements for the Collins-Whitman wedding. "Oh, yes, Miss Collins," the florist said cheerfully. "We received your payment last month. Beautiful arrangement choices, by the way. Your sister has excellent taste." "Just to confirm, was our payment the only deposit you received for this event?" "Yes, your check for $3,000 covered our full deposit requirement. We'll collect the remaining balance on the day of delivery." I hung up and immediately called the catering company. "Collins-Whitman wedding," I said when they answered. "I need to verify our payment status." "Certainly. We received your $4,200 deposit 6 weeks ago. The final payment of $8,300 will be due 48 hours before the event." "Has anyone else made payments toward this event?" "No, just your initial deposit. Is there a problem?" "No problem, thank you." The photographer told the same story. So did the rental company for chairs and tables. So did the bakery for the wedding cake. Every single vendor had been paid exclusively with money from my savings account. I called Madison immediately, my hands shaking with anger. "Brisa, I'm so glad you called," she answered. "I've been worried about you since yesterday." "Madison, I need you to explain something to me." "Of course. What is it?" "I just spoke with every vendor for your wedding. The florist, the caterer, the photographer, everyone." Silence on the other end of the line. "Madison." "I'm here." "Every single deposit for your wedding was paid with my money, not partially paid, completely paid." "Brisa, I can explain. You told me the Whitman family was covering most of the expenses and my contribution would just help with extras. That was the original plan." "What happened to the original plan?" Madison's voice became very small. "Richard's family is providing the venue and some other things." "What other things?" "The venue for the ceremony and access to their country club for the reception." "That's it." "Well, yes, but those are very expensive things, Brisa. Do you have any idea what it costs to rent a venue like the Whitman estate? Do you have any idea what it cost me to save $10,000 working as a mechanic? I never asked you to sacrifice anything." But you let me believe I was making a small contribution to a larger budget when in reality I was funding the entire wedding myself. It's not the entire wedding. Richard's family is covering the venue and some other expenses. What other expenses specifically? Another long pause. Madison, what other expenses is his family covering? They're paying for the alcohol at the reception. Alcohol, that's it. I'm paying for flowers, food, photography decorations, your dress, and they're covering drinks. And the venue, Brisa. Don't forget the venue. A venue I'm not allowed to set foot in. I hung up and immediately called my parents' house. Dad answered on the third ring. Hi, sweetheart, how are you doing? Dad, I need to ask you something important about Madison's wedding budget. What about it? How much money have you and Mom contributed to the wedding expenses? Oh, well, we've been helping where we can. How much specifically? It's not really about the specific amount, Brisa. It's about supporting your sister during this important time in her life. Dad, please just tell me how much money you've contributed. We took out a small loan to help cover some of the additional costs. My heart stopped. What kind of loan? Just a small home equity loan, nothing we can't manage. How much? $15,000. I felt like I was going to throw up. Dad, you borrowed against the house. It's not a big deal, sweetheart. The interest rate was very reasonable, and we'll have it paid off in a few years. A few years? Madison's happiness is worth a little financial sacrifice. This wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her to marry into a wonderful family. Dad, does Madison know you borrowed against the house? She knows we wanted to help make her day special. But does she know you put your home at risk? We didn't put anything at risk, Brisa. We're both still working and we can easily handle the monthly payments. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at all the financial documents spread across the table. My $10,000 plus my parents' $15,000 loan meant that our family had contributed $25,000 to fund a wedding where I wasn't welcome, and my parents were treated like embarrassing relatives. Meanwhile, the wealthy Whitman family was contributing the use of their property and some alcohol. But what bothered me most was the realization that Madison had allowed our parents to mortgage their home for her wedding without telling them about my exclusion from the ceremony. They thought they were funding a celebration that would include their entire family. I picked up my phone and called Carmen. I need your help investigating something, I said when she answered. What did you find? I found out that my family has contributed $25,000 to fund a wedding that I'm banned from attending, while the wealthy family contributing alcohol and a venue location. That's messed up, but not necessarily criminal. Carmen, there's something off about this whole situation. The way Richard talked about temporary arrangements, the way Madison seemed scared instead of happy, the way this family treats working-class people. What are you thinking? I'm thinking maybe we should look into Richard Whitman Jr.'s background more carefully. If my sister is sacrificing everything for this marriage, I want to make sure she's not walking into something dangerous. I can run a comprehensive background check if you want. Do it. What am I looking for specifically? Anything that suggests this marriage might not be what Madison thinks it is. As I cleaned up all the financial documents, one thing became crystal clear. I held all the financial leverage in this situation. Madison's dream wedding was entirely dependent on money from our family, not the wealthy Whitmans. If I chose to withdraw my funding, the entire celebration would collapse immediately. The question was, did I have the courage to potentially destroy my sister's wedding to protect my own dignity and my parents' financial security? The next morning, Carmen called me before 7 o'clock. Brisa, we need to talk. Can you meet me for breakfast? You found something, didn't you? I found a lot of things. How soon can you get to Melissa's Diner on 5th Street? 20 minutes later, I slid into the booth across from Carmen, who had a manila folder thick with papers sitting beside her coffee cup. This is bad, Brisa, really bad. How bad? Carmen opened the folder and pulled out several printed pages. Richard Whitman Jr. has been engaged twice before in the past 4 years. Engaged twice. First engagement was to Rebecca Patterson, daughter of Patterson Manufacturing. Her family owns 3 factories in Ohio. The engagement lasted 8 months before she called it off. Why did she call it off? According to my sources, she discovered Richard had been borrowing money against her family's business assets without their knowledge. Carmen pulled out another document. Second engagement was to Jennifer Hayes, whose family owns a chain of successful restaurants. That engagement lasted 6 months. Let me guess, financial impropriety. Jennifer's father found out Richard had been using their family credit accounts to pay off personal debts. When they confronted him, he claimed it was all a misunderstanding, but they ended the engagement immediately. I felt sick. So Madison is engagement number 3. It gets worse, Brisa. Both previous fiancés reported that Richard used pregnancy scares to pressure them into rushed weddings. Pregnancy scares. Rebecca told investigators that Richard convinced her she was pregnant and pressured her to elope immediately. When she took multiple pregnancy tests that came back negative, he claimed the stress of wedding planning had caused a miscarriage. And Jennifer, similar story. Richard claimed they needed to get married quickly because she was pregnant. When she insisted on seeing a doctor, he became controlling and manipulative, trying to isolate her from her family and friends. I stared at the documents, feeling cold despite the warm restaurant. Carmen Madison told me she's 10 weeks pregnant. Has she seen a doctor? I don't know. I didn't think to ask. Carmen pulled out more papers. There's something else. Richard owes significant money to several different creditors. Credit cards, personal loans, and some debts that appear to be related to gambling. How much money? Conservative estimate around $60,000 in various debts. $60,000. And that's just what I could verify through public records. The actual amount could be much higher. Carmen leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Brisa, I think your sister is being targeted specifically because Richard researched your family's financial situation and knew about your savings. You think he chose Madison deliberately? I think he's been looking for families with available cash who are desperate enough for social advancement that they'll overlook red flags. But how would he know about our family's finances? Carmen pulled out one more document. Because 3 months before he started dating Madison, Richard hired a private investigator to conduct background checks on several potential targets. She slid a copy of an invoice across the table. The investigation company had been paid to research marriageable women from middle-class families with demonstrable access to capital. Madison's name appeared on a list of 12 women who had been investigated. He studied our family like we were marks in a con game, I said slowly. The investigator's report includes details about your job, your savings account, your parents' home equity, and Madison's career prospects. So when he started dating her, he already knew exactly how much money our family could contribute to a wedding. Exactly. And look at this. Carmen showed me a text message conversation that had been included in the investigative report. The private investigator had texted Richard, Colin's family appears optimal for your needs. Daughter has access to significant savings, parents have home equity available, and family dynamics suggest they'll prioritize social advancement over financial caution. I felt like I couldn't breathe. He planned this entire thing. Brisa, there's one more thing you need to see. Carmen pulled out a final document. I managed to get a copy of a phone conversation Richard had with someone 2 weeks ago. My contact at the phone company owed me a favor. She handed me a transcript of the conversation. Richard, everything is proceeding according to plan. The family is fully committed financially. Unknown caller. What about the sister's situation? Richard, that's been handled. She won't be a problem for the ceremony. Unknown caller, and after the ceremony, Richard, after the ceremony, we'll have access to their home equity and any other assets. The marriage gives me legal standing to manage family finances if needed. Unknown caller, what about the wife? Richard, Madison is useful for now. She's establishing my credibility with her family and providing access to their resources. Once everything is properly transferred and secured, we can reassess the situation. Unknown caller, reassess how. Richard, marriages and Tom, especially when wives become unstable or difficult to manage. As long as I maintain control of shared assets during the dissolution, the temporary inconvenience becomes quite profitable. The conversation continued with Richard discussing plans to use Madison's pregnancy as leverage to gain access to her family's financial accounts, then manufacture grounds for divorce once he had control of their money. I stared at the transcript, feeling rage building inside me like a furnace. He's planning to marry my sister, steal our family's money, and then divorce her after destroying her emotionally and financially. That's exactly what he's planning. And Madison has no idea. Based on his previous pattern, he's probably isolating her from friends and family while making her feel completely dependent on him for emotional and financial security. I thought about how scared and desperate Madison had seemed during our last conversation, how different she was from her normal, confident self. Carmen, I have to stop this wedding. I know, but you need to be careful about how you approach it. Richard has a pattern of becoming dangerous when his plans are threatened. What do you mean, dangerous? Rebecca Patterson filed a police report claiming Richard threatened her physically when she tried to end their engagement. Jennifer Hayes got a restraining order after Richard started stalking her and her family members. So if I expose him, he might hurt Madison. He might hurt Madison, he might hurt you, or he might disappear with whatever money he's already managed to access. I sat back in the booth feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of the situation. My sister was about to marry a predator who was planning to destroy our entire family financially. What do I do, Carmen? We build an airtight case with enough evidence to protect Madison and your family while ensuring Richard faces legal consequences for his crimes. How long will that take? I can have everything compiled within 48 hours. But Brisa, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that Madison might not believe you initially. Why wouldn't she believe me? Because Richard is an expert manipulator. He's probably spent months conditioning her to distrust outside influences and rely entirely on his version of reality. So even with proof she might choose him over her own family, it's possible. But once she sees the evidence and understands the pattern, she'll realize how much danger she's in. As we left the diner, Carmen handed me the entire folder of documents. Keep these safe. We're going to need every piece of evidence to stop Richard and protect your family. Walking back to my car, I felt the weight of responsibility settling over me like a heavy blanket. I had 48 hours to save my sister from a predator, protect my parents' home from foreclosure, and somehow preserve what remained of our family relationships. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had the tools and knowledge needed to fight back. Carmen called me the next morning with a plan that made my stomach churn with nervous energy. We need to observe Richard in his natural environment, she explained. I want to see how he behaves when he thinks no one is watching, especially around his family. Where do you suggest we do that? The Riverview Country Club. Richard has lunch there every Tuesday with his parents. It's their regular family meeting to discuss business matters. How do you know that? Because I spent yesterday tracking his routine. The man is incredibly predictable when it comes to maintaining appearances. 2 hours later, Carmen and I sat in her car across the street from the most exclusive country club in the city. The building looked like something from a movie about old Southern aristocracy, all white columns and manicured gardens. I feel ridiculous, I said, adjusting the conservative business suit Carmen had insisted I wear. What if someone recognizes us? No one's going to recognize us. We're just two professional women having lunch at an upscale restaurant. Carmen had made reservations under false names and created fake business cards identifying us as consultants from out of state. The plan was to sit close enough to observe the Whitman family dynamics while remaining completely invisible. The maitre d' seated us at a corner table with a perfect view of the main dining room. Within 10 minutes, Richard arrived with an older couple who could only be his parents. Richard Sr. looked exactly like I'd expected from his photos. silver-haired, expensively dressed, carrying himself with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Eleanor Whitman was perfectly polished in the way that only comes from decades of professional grooming and designer clothing. But it was their behavior toward the restaurant staff that immediately caught my attention. When the server approached to take their drink orders, Eleanor didn't look up from her menu or acknowledge his presence. She simply stated her order, as if speaking to empty air. Richard Sr. snapped his fingers impatiently when the water glasses weren't filled quickly enough for his liking. And Richard Jr., my sister's fiancé, treated the young waitress like she was completely invisible, continuing his conversation while she stood waiting to take his food order. "Do you see how they're treating these people?" I whispered to Carmen. "I see it. Keep watching." As their lunch proceeded, I witnessed behavior that made my skin crawl. Eleanor complained loudly about the temperature of her soup, demanding the server take it back to the kitchen twice. When the poor young man returned with the reheated soup, she tasted it dismissively and announced it was barely acceptable. Richard Sr. questioned every item on the bill when it arrived, implying that the server might be trying to overcharge them despite the fact that they were members of this exclusive club. But it was what they discussed during their meal that really disturbed me. Carmen had positioned us close enough that we could hear portions of their conversation, especially when their voices rose during disagreements. "The Collins family situation is proceeding exactly as planned," Richard Jr. was saying. "They've committed their available capital to the wedding expenses." "And what about the sister problem?" Eleanor asked. "Handled completely. She won't be present for any of the wedding events." "Good. We can't have that kind of element around our guests." Richard Sr. leaned forward. "What about longer-term asset access? Once I'm legally married to Madison, I'll have joint access to any family accounts she's added to. The parents have already mortgaged their home to help fund the wedding, which means they're financially vulnerable." "How vulnerable?" Eleanor asked. "Vulnerable enough that they'll agree to any financial arrangement that seems to offer stability for their daughter and grandchild." Speaking of the grandchild, Richard Sr. said, "Have you confirmed the pregnancy situation?" Richard Jr. smirked. "Madison believes she's pregnant because I convinced her that her symptoms were conclusive. She hasn't seen a doctor yet because I've told her we should wait until after the honeymoon for a full medical consultation." Eleanor laughed coldly. "Brilliant manipulation, darling. The pregnancy pressure eliminates her ability to back out of the wedding." "And if she's not actually pregnant," Richard Sr. asked, "then we'll convince her that the stress of wedding planning caused a miscarriage. Women blame themselves for these things, so she'll be even more emotionally dependent on my support." I felt like I was going to be sick listening to them discuss my sister's life like it was a chess game. "What about the divorce timeline?" Eleanor continued. "I'm thinking 18 months to 2 years. Long enough to establish legal access to family assets, short enough to minimize long-term complications." Grounds for divorce: mental instability, emotional breakdown, maybe substance abuse issues. It's surprisingly easy to manufacture evidence of an unstable wife when you control her social environment and medical care. Carmen grabbed my hand under the table, probably sensing that I was about to stand up and confront them directly. Richard Sr. pulled out his phone and showed his family something on the screen. "Speaking of evidence, look what our investigator compiled about the Collins family background." They huddled around the phone, laughing quietly at whatever they were seeing. "The sisters' motorcycle club friends could be useful," Eleanor said. "We could imply criminal associations if we need to discredit her testimony later. And the father's employment history shows enough job changes to suggest instability," Richard Jr. added. "If we need to establish a pattern of family dysfunction, we have plenty of material to work with." "What about protective measures?" Richard Sr. asked. "What if the Collins family becomes suspicious before the wedding?" "I've already started documenting Madison's emotional volatility. Text messages, recorded phone calls, witnesses who can testify about her erratic behavior." "What witnesses?" Friends of mine who'll say they observed Madison being unreasonable, demanding, or emotionally unstable during wedding planning. Eleanor clapped her hands softly. Excellent preparation, darling. This could be our most profitable family acquisition yet. Family acquisition, Richard Jr. asked. Well, that's what these marriages are, really. Strategic acquisitions of middle-class families with accessible assets and limited legal sophistication. They continued discussing their plan in detail while Carmen and I sat frozen in horror. They talked about manipulating Madison's mental health, stealing our family's money, and destroying our reputations as casually as other families might discuss vacation plans. When they finally prepared to leave, Richard Jr. pulled out a small recording device from his pocket. I recorded part of my conversation with Madison yesterday, he told his parents. She was crying about her sister's situation, and she said some things that could be interpreted as unstable emotional outbursts. Perfect, Eleanor said. Document everything. We want a complete record of her deteriorating mental state. As they walked past our table toward the exit, I heard Eleanor say, "The Collins family has no idea what's about to happen to them." After they left, Carmen and I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. "Did you get all of that?" I finally whispered. Carmen held up her phone. "Every word. I recorded the entire conversation." They're planning to destroy Madison emotionally, steal our family's money, and frame us as unstable criminals. And they're documenting everything to build a legal case that will protect them when they execute their plan. I felt rage building inside me like a wildfire. Carmen, we have to stop them. We will stop them. But now we know we're not just dealing with garden-variety financial fraud. This is a sophisticated criminal operation designed to destroy entire families. What do we do next? We gather more evidence and we prepare for war. As we left the restaurant, I realized that my family had stumbled into something far more dangerous than a simple case of social prejudice. The Whitmans were professional predators, and we were their carefully selected prey. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated the determination of a sister who would fight to protect her family, no matter what the cost. That evening, Carmen and I spread all our evidence across my dining room table, like generals planning a military campaign. Photos, financial records, recorded conversations, background investigations, and witness statements created a comprehensive picture of the Whitman family's criminal operation. "We have enough evidence to send Richard to prison," Carmen said, organizing documents into neat piles. "Fraud, theft, conspiracy, attempted extortion. The question is how to present this to Madison in a way that breaks through his psychological manipulation." "What do you mean?" "Richard has spent months conditioning Madison to distrust outside influences and rely entirely on his version of reality. She's been systematically isolated from friends and family members who might question his behavior." I thought about how different Madison had seemed during our recent conversations. Fearful, defensive, desperate in ways that weren't typical of her personality. So even if I show her proof that he's a criminal, she might not believe it. She might interpret your evidence as jealousy or sabotage, especially if Richard has already planted seeds suggesting that you're unstable or vindictive. Carmen pulled out a folder I hadn't seen before. That's why I contacted some additional resources. "What kind of resources?" I reached out to my friend Jake Martinez. He's a licensed therapist who specializes in helping people escape manipulative relationships. He's willing to review our evidence and provide guidance about the best approach. And I also contacted my friend Sophie Chen, who's a nurse practitioner. If Madison hasn't actually seen a doctor about her pregnancy, Sophie can provide discreet medical consultation. "You think the pregnancy might be fake?" "I think it's suspicious that Richard is pressuring Madison to avoid medical care until after their honeymoon." Carmen opened another folder. I also reached out to Derek Williams. He owns a small construction company, and he's had business dealings with Whitman Properties. He might be willing to provide testimony about their fraudulent business practices. So, we're building a support network. We're building a team of credible witnesses who can help Madison understand that this isn't about family jealousy or social prejudice. This is about protecting her from criminals. I appreciated Carmen's strategic thinking, but I felt overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. What if Madison refuses to listen no matter what evidence we present? Then we have to be prepared to take legal action to protect your parents' financial assets and pursue criminal charges against Richard. Even if that means destroying Madison's relationship. Brisa, her relationship is already destroyed. Richard is planning to marry her, steal your family's money, and then divorce her after making her believe she's mentally unstable. The weight of that reality settled over me like a crushing boulder. My sister wasn't just making a bad choice about marriage. She was walking into a trap designed to destroy her psychologically and financially. How do we approach this? I asked. Carefully. We need to present the evidence in a way that doesn't trigger her defensive mechanisms. Carmen pulled out a detailed timeline she'd created. First, we invite Madison to a neutral location where she can examine the evidence without Richard's influence, somewhere she feels safe and comfortable. Like where? Maybe the coffee shop where you two used to study together in college, somewhere associated with positive memories of your relationship. Then what? We start with the financial evidence. Show her exactly how much money your family has contributed versus how much the Whitman family has contributed. Let her see the disparity without making her feel stupid for not noticing it earlier. Carmen pointed to another section of her timeline. Next, we show her the background information about Richard's previous engagements. Let her see the pattern of behavior without immediately jumping to accusations about her specific situation. And then we play the recorded conversation from the country club. Let her hear Richard discussing their plans in his own words. What if she still doesn't believe it? Then we have Jake available to explain how psychological manipulation works, and Sophie available to discuss the pregnancy situation. Carmen's plan was thorough and thoughtful, but I still felt nervous about confronting Madison with information that would shatter her entire understanding of her relationship. What if this backfires and she cuts off contact with our family completely? Brisa, she's already being isolated from your family. Richard is systematically removing all of her support systems, so she'll be completely dependent on him. But what if our confrontation pushes her further into his control? That's a risk we have to take, because the alternative is watching her walk into a trap that will destroy her life and your family's financial security. I spent the next 2 hours reviewing every piece of evidence, trying to imagine how Madison would react to each revelation. The financial disparity would probably shock her. The information about Richard's previous engagements might make her defensive. But the recorded conversation, hearing Richard discuss plans to manipulate her mentally and steal from our family, that would be devastating. Carmen, what if Madison is already too psychologically dependent on Richard to leave him, even after seeing all this evidence? Then we document everything we've shown her and pursue legal action to protect your parents' assets. We can't force Madison to make smart choices, but we can prevent Richard from stealing your family's money. Legal action, how? Restraining orders, fraud investigations, criminal charges. If Richard is running a systematic con operation, law enforcement will be very interested in our evidence. Carmen gathered all the documents back into organized folders. But let's focus on saving Madison first. She's your sister, and she deserves a chance to see the truth before we involve law enforcement. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, rehearsing different ways to present the evidence to Madison. How do you tell someone you love that their entire relationship is based on lies and criminal manipulation? How do you save someone who might not want to be saved? But I kept coming back to the same conclusion. Madison was my sister. She was carrying what she believed was her first child. She was sacrificing everything for a man who was planning to destroy her. I had to at least try to save her, even if it meant risking our relationship forever. The next morning, I called Madison and asked if she wanted to meet for coffee at Grounded the Cafe, where we'd spent countless hours studying during college. "Is everything okay?" she asked, sounding suspicious. I want to apologize for how I reacted to your wedding news. I lied. I think I was hurt and jealous, and I said some things I regret. Oh, Brisa, I'm so relieved to hear you say that. Can we meet this afternoon and talk through everything? I want to understand your situation better and see if there's a way for us to move forward as sisters. Of course, I'd love that. As I hung up, I felt terrible about the deception, but Madison's safety was more important than my discomfort with lying. In 6 hours, I would either save my sister or lose her forever. Grounded Coffee Shop looked exactly the same as it had during our college years. Mismatched furniture, local artwork covering brick walls, and the familiar smell of espresso and fresh pastries. Madison arrived 15 minutes early and was already sitting at our old corner table when I walked in. She looked tired and thin, more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping well, and her normally perfect posture seemed slumped with exhaustion. "You look beautiful," I said, hugging her carefully. It wasn't entirely true. She looked stressed and unhealthy, but I wanted to start our conversation on a positive note. "Thank you. I feel like I've been running on coffee and anxiety for weeks." I ordered my usual latte and sat down across from her, trying to project calm confidence while my heart pounded with nervous energy. "Madison, I want you to know that everything I'm about to show you comes from a place of love and concern for your safety." Her expression immediately became guarded. "What do you mean, show me?" I pulled out the first folder of financial documents. "I want you to see exactly how the wedding expenses have been allocated between our families and the Whitman family." "Brisa, we don't need to go through financial details." "Madison, please, just look at this." I spread the vendor receipts and payment records across the table, showing her the clear pattern of payments coming exclusively from our family, while the Whitman contribution remained limited to venue access and alcohol. Madison glanced at the papers but didn't really examine them. "I know our family has been generous, and I'm grateful for that." "Madison, look at the numbers. Really look at them." Reluctantly, she picked up the florist invoice and saw the $3,000 payment from my account. Then the catering bill showing $4,200 from my account. Then the photography contract with my payment information. "I don't understand why you're showing me this," she said, but her voice was becoming less certain. "Because I want you to understand that our family has contributed $25,000 to fund your wedding, while Richard's family has contributed the use of their property and alcohol for the reception." "The venue is very expensive, Brisa." "I'm sure it is, but our family has taken out loans and depleted savings accounts to pay for your celebration, while his wealthy family has contributed almost nothing financial." Madison pushed the papers away. "Richard explained all of this to me. His family's contribution is different, but equally valuable." "Madison, there's more you need to see." I pulled out the folder containing Richard's background investigation. "Carmen helped me research Richard's relationship history." "You investigated my fiancé?" Madison's voice rose with indignation. "Brisa, that's completely inappropriate." "Richard has been engaged twice before in the past 4 years." "So people have relationship histories?" "Both previous engagements ended when the women's families discovered Richard was stealing money from them." Madison stood up abruptly. "I'm not listening to this." "Madison, please sit down. Please let me show you the evidence." "Evidence you're treating my fiancé like a criminal suspect." "Because he is a criminal suspect." Other coffee shop patrons were starting to look in our direction as Madison's voice continued rising. "Richard told me you might try something like this," she said, gathering her purse. "He warned me that you were jealous of our relationship and might try to sabotage our wedding." "Madison, he's been manipulating you." "He's been protecting me from toxic family members who can't stand to see me happy." I felt desperation rising in my chest. "Madison, please just listen to one more thing." I pulled out my phone and queued up the recording from the country club. "Richard doesn't know we recorded this, but I want you to hear him discussing your relationship with his parents." "I'm not listening to illegally recorded conversations." "Please, Madison, just listen for 30 seconds. I pressed play and Richard's voice filled the space between us. Madison believes she's pregnant because I convinced her that her symptoms were conclusive. She hasn't seen a doctor yet because I've told her we should wait until after the honeymoon for a full medical consultation. Madison's face went completely white. Eleanor's voice continued. Brilliant manipulation, darling. The pregnancy pressure eliminates her ability to back out of the wedding. Richard's voice. And if she's not actually pregnant, then we'll convince her that the stress of wedding planning caused a miscarriage. Madison grabbed my phone and stopped the recording. Where did you get this? Carmen and I observed Richard having lunch with his parents yesterday. They discussed their entire plan to manipulate you emotionally and steal money from our family. Madison stared at the phone in her hands, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, and growing anger. This could be fake. Audio can be manipulated. Madison, you know that's Richard's voice. Even if it's real, it could be taken out of context. What context would make those statements acceptable? Madison set my phone down on the table with trembling hands. Brisa, I'm pregnant. I've missed 2 periods. I've been nauseous every morning. My breasts are tender. Those are real symptoms. When did you last see a doctor? Richard said we should wait until after the honeymoon to start prenatal care. Madison pregnancy tests are available at every pharmacy. Why haven't you taken one? Richard said home tests aren't reliable early in pregnancy. I reached across the table and took her hands. Madison, I love you. I want you to be happy and safe. But I think Richard has been lying to you about everything. Madison pulled her hands away. You're asking me to believe that the man I love, the man I'm marrying in 12 days, is actually a criminal who's been manipulating me for months. Yes, that's exactly what I'm asking you to believe. Based on financial records and a secretly recorded conversation, based on a pattern of criminal behavior that's destroyed other women's lives. Madison stood up again this time, grabbing her purse with finality. Brisa, I can't do this. I can't sit here and listen to you systematically tear apart my relationship and my future. Madison, please don't leave. I love Richard. He loves me. We're having a baby together and we're getting married in less than 2 weeks. What if you're not actually pregnant? Madison turned back toward me, her eyes filled with tears and fury. Then I guess I'll find out when I see a doctor after our honeymoon. What if Richard disappears with our family's money before then? Then I'll deal with that situation if it happens. Madison, our parents mortgaged their house to help pay for your wedding. I didn't ask them to do that. But they did it because they love you and want you to be happy. And I appreciate their sacrifice. What if Richard's plan succeeds and they lose their home? Madison paused at the coffee shop door. Brisa, I need you to make a choice. You can support my marriage and be part of my life, or you can continue trying to destroy my relationship and be excluded from my future. Madison, I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need your support. What if I can't support something I believe will hurt you? Then I guess we don't have anything else to talk about. Madison walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me sitting alone with folders full of evidence that she'd refused to examine. I sat there for another hour, replaying every moment of our conversation and wondering what I could have done differently. Maybe I'd presented the information too aggressively. Maybe I should have started with emotional appeals rather than financial evidence. But as I drove home, I realized that Madison's reaction proved exactly what Carmen had warned me about. Richard's psychological manipulation had been so thorough that Madison couldn't process information that contradicted his version of reality. My sister was so completely under his control that she was willing to sacrifice her relationship with her own family rather than question his honesty, which meant that saving Madison might require destroying her wedding, even if that meant losing her forever. The next morning, I sat in my car outside First National Bank, staring at my phone and rehearsing exactly what I was going to say to each vendor. My conversation with Madison had made one thing crystal clear. She was too psychologically manipulated to protect herself or our family from Richard's criminal plan, which meant I had to take action to protect our parents' financial security, even if Madison never forgave me. I walked into the bank and requested to speak with my account representative about withdrawing the $10,000 that had been designated for Madison's wedding expenses. "Miss Collins, are you sure you want to withdraw the entire amount?" the representative asked. "This will close several automatic payments you've set up for vendor deposits." "That's exactly what I want to do." "May I ask if there's a problem with the services you've contracted?" "There's a problem with the entire event." Within 30 minutes, I had a cashier's check for $10,000 and documentation showing that all automatic payments to wedding vendors had been canceled immediately. Now came the difficult part, calling each vendor to explain the situation. I started with the florist. "Petal Perfection, this is Sandra." "Hi Sandra, this is Brisa Collins. I need to discuss the Collins-Whitman wedding flowers." "Oh yes, beautiful arrangements. We're scheduled to deliver everything next Friday morning." "I'm afraid I need to cancel our order completely." Silence on the other end of the line. "Miss Collins, the wedding is in 11 days. We've already ordered all the flowers and started creating the arrangements." "I understand this creates problems for you, and I apologize for the short notice. Can you tell me why you're canceling?" I'd prepared for this question. "We've discovered that the groom has been misrepresenting his intentions regarding the marriage, and we believe this wedding should not proceed." "I see. Well, unfortunately, our contract specifies that cancellations within 2 weeks of the event result in forfeiture of the entire deposit." "I understand. Keep the deposit for your inconvenience. I just need to ensure that no flowers are delivered to any location associated with this wedding." The conversation with the caterer went similarly, though they were more understanding when I explained that we'd discovered the groom was planning to defraud our family. "Miss Collins, we appreciate your honesty about the situation," the catering manager said. "We've unfortunately seen cases where families have been taken advantage of during wedding planning. Thank you for understanding. We'll cancel the catering order immediately. Your deposit will cover our costs, and we'll make sure no food is delivered to any location for this event." The photographer was sympathetic but professional. "I can cancel your photography contract, but I want you to know that we take client confidentiality very seriously. We won't discuss your family's situation with anyone else involved in the wedding." "I appreciate that." "Miss Collins, if your sister contacts us directly about the photography, how would you like us to handle that conversation? Tell her that the photography services were canceled due to payment issues, and she'll need to make new arrangements if she wants professional photography for her event." By noon, I had successfully canceled every service that had been paid for with my money. The flowers, catering, photography, decorations, and even Madison's dress alterations had all been terminated. Madison's dream wedding was collapsing in real time. My phone started ringing almost immediately. "Brisa, what have you done?" Madison's voice was hysterical. "The florist just called me saying our entire order was canceled." "I withdrew my financial support for your wedding." "You can't do that." "I can do that, Madison. It was my money." "But the wedding is in 11 days. "Then you and Richard's family will need to find alternative funding for your celebration." "Brisa, please, I'm begging you, don't destroy my wedding." "Madison, I tried to show you evidence that Richard is planning to defraud our family. You refused to look at it." "So you decided to sabotage my entire life." "I decided to protect our parents from losing their home to pay for a wedding that's designed to steal their money." Madison was crying now. "Richard is going to be furious. His parents are going to think our family is completely unstable. Richard's parents are planning to help him steal our family's assets. Maybe they should think we're unstable enough to fight back." "You don't understand what you've done, Brisa. This wedding has to happen." "Why does it have to happen?" "Because I'm pregnant and I need Richard's support." "Madison, take a pregnancy test, go to a doctor. Find out if you're actually pregnant before you commit your entire life to someone who's lying to you." "I don't have time for that now. I have to figure out how to salvage my wedding." Madison, listen to me carefully. If Richard really loves you, he'll help you find solutions for these problems. If he doesn't really love you, he'll blame you for the problems and make you feel guilty for things that aren't your fault. What's that supposed to mean? It means watch how Richard reacts to these setbacks. Does he comfort you and work with you to find alternatives, or does he get angry and make you feel like the problems are your responsibility to solve? Madison hung up without responding. An hour later, Mom called. Brisa Madison is here crying hysterically. She says you've destroyed her wedding. I canceled the services that I was paying for. Why would you do such a thing? Because Richard Whitman is a criminal who's planning to steal money from our family, and I'm not going to fund our own destruction. Brisa, that's a very serious accusation. Mom, I have recorded evidence of Richard discussing plans to manipulate Madison psychologically and gain access to our financial assets. What kind of recorded evidence? Richard had lunch with his parents yesterday and they discussed their entire criminal plan in detail. You were secretly recording people. Mom, Richard is planning to marry Madison, steal our money, and then divorce her after making her believe she's mentally unstable. Silence on the other end of the line. Mom, Brisa, come over here right now. Bring whatever evidence you think you have. Let's all sit down and discuss this like adults. Is Richard there? No, Richard is not here. Is Madison willing to look at evidence, or is she going to refuse to examine it like she did yesterday? She's willing to listen if you can prove what you're saying. I'll be there in 20 minutes. As I gathered all of Carmen's folders, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Miss Collins, this is Eleanor Whitman. I believe we need to have a conversation about your recent actions regarding my son's wedding. Please call me at your earliest convenience. My blood ran cold. The Whitman family was already mobilizing to deal with the threat I represented to their criminal plan, which meant the real battle was just beginning. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found Madison curled up on the living room couch like a wounded animal surrounded by crumpled tissues and empty coffee cups. Mom and Dad sat nearby looking helpless and confused. Madison, I said gently, I know you're upset, but I need you to look at the evidence I tried to show you yesterday. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Brisa, Richard is furious. He says your actions prove that our family is unstable and manipulative. What exactly did he say? He said you're trying to destroy our relationship because you're jealous that I'm marrying into a successful family. And what did you tell him? I told him you were just hurt about not being invited to the wedding and that you'd probably calm down and restore the funding once you had time to process everything. I felt a chill run down my spine. Madison, did you promise Richard that I would restore the funding? I told him I was confident we could work things out as a family. What did he say to that? Madison's voice became very small. He said if the funding wasn't restored within 48 hours, he'd have to reconsider whether our families were compatible for marriage. Dad leaned forward. What does that mean exactly? It means he's threatening to call off the wedding if we can't pay for it ourselves, Madison whispered. Which proves exactly what I've been trying to tell you, I said. If Richard really loved you, he'd be looking for solutions to these problems. Instead, he's threatening to abandon you unless our family provides the money he needs. That's not fair, Brisa. He's just stressed about the wedding plans falling apart. I opened the first folder of evidence. Madison, I want to show you Richard's financial background. I don't want to see it. I want to show you his pattern of targeting women from families with available assets. Stop it, Brisa. I want you to hear the recording of him discussing plans to manipulate your pregnancy and steal our money. I said, stop it. Madison stood up and ran toward the stairs, but Mom caught her arm. Madison, honey, if Brisa has evidence of something serious, we need to examine it. I can't listen to this, Mom. If I start doubting Richard now, I'll lose everything. What do you mean you'll lose everything? Madison sank back onto the couch, looking defeated. I mean, I'll lose my fiancé, my wedding, my future security, and my chance to give my baby a stable family. Dad spoke quietly. Madison, what if you're not actually pregnant? I am pregnant, Dad. But have you taken a test? Have you seen a doctor? Richard said we should wait until after the honeymoon for medical consultations. Madison, I said gently, why would he want you to wait for medical care if you're carrying his child? Because he said early medical interventions can sometimes cause complications. Mom and Dad exchanged worried glances. Sweetheart, Mom said, that doesn't sound like accurate medical advice. Are you all saying that Richard has been lying to me about everything? Madison's voice was rising toward hysteria. We're saying we want you to verify your pregnancy independently before you make life-altering decisions based on Richard's medical advice, Dad said carefully. Fine. I'll take a pregnancy test right now, and when it comes back positive, I want all of you to apologize for doubting my relationship. Madison stormed into the downstairs bathroom with a pregnancy test Mom retrieved from her medicine cabinet. The rest of us sat in uncomfortable silence, waiting for results that might change everything. 10 minutes later, Madison emerged from the bathroom holding the test with shaking hands. It's negative, she whispered. What? Mom asked. The test is negative. I'm not pregnant. Madison collapsed onto the couch, staring at the test like it was a foreign object. But I had symptoms: morning nausea, breast tenderness, missed periods. Madison, I said gently, stress and anxiety can cause all of those symptoms. But Richard was so certain I was pregnant. Because Richard wanted you to believe you were pregnant. Madison's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, and growing horror. He's been lying to me about the pregnancy. I pulled out my phone and played the recording from the country club. Madison believes she's pregnant because I convinced her that her symptoms were conclusive. Madison listened to Richard's voice with growing shock. When Eleanor's voice added, the pregnancy pressure eliminates her ability to back out of the wedding, Madison grabbed the phone and threw it across the room. He's been manipulating me for months, she said, her voice hollow with disbelief. Madison, there's more you need to know. I showed her the background information about Richard's previous engagements, the financial discrepancies in wedding funding, and the evidence of his systematic criminal behavior. Madison examined each document carefully, no longer defensive or dismissive. He chose me because your investigator told him our family had accessible assets. Yes. And he was planning to divorce me after stealing our money. Yes. And he's been recording our conversations to build a case that I'm mentally unstable. According to what we heard at the country club, yes. Madison sat in stunned silence for several minutes, processing the magnitude of Richard's deception. I've been so stupid, she finally said. You weren't stupid, sweetheart, Dad said. You were targeted by professionals who know how to manipulate people. Madison, I asked carefully, what do you want to do now? I want to call off the wedding completely. Are you sure? Brisa, he convinced me I was pregnant to pressure me into marriage. He planned to steal our family's money and then divorce me while making me think I was crazy. What part of that suggests I should marry him? I felt overwhelming relief that Madison was finally seeing Richard clearly. What about his reaction when he finds out the wedding is canceled? I don't care about his reaction. I care about protecting our family from his criminal plans. Madison, Mom said, what about the money we've already spent? The venue, deposit the loan we took out. We'll figure out the financial situation, Madison said, but we're not going through with a wedding designed to destroy our family. As if summoned by our conversation, Madison's phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen. Answer it, I suggested, but put it on speaker so we can all hear how he reacts to problems. Madison answered the phone with trembling hands. Hello, Richard. Madison, darling, I've been thinking about our situation and I have some ideas for resolving the vendor problems. What kind of ideas? Well, my family is willing to advance some money to cover the canceled services, but we'd need assurance that your family's financial contributions would be restored immediately after the wedding. What kind of assurance? Just some documentation showing your parents' available assets and your sister's banking information. Standard paperwork for family financial planning. Madison looked at me with wide eyes. Richard was asking for access to our family's complete financial information. "Richard, I need to ask you something important." "Of course, darling." "Am I actually pregnant?" Silence on the other end of the line. "Madison, what kind of question is that?" "It's a simple question. Am I pregnant or not?" "Sweetheart, you know we discussed waiting until after our honeymoon for medical consultations." "Richard, I took a pregnancy test today. It was negative." Another long silence. Madison, home pregnancy tests aren't reliable early in pregnancy. You shouldn't trust those results. "So you're saying I am pregnant despite a negative test?" "I'm saying we should trust the symptoms you've been experiencing rather than an unreliable testing method." Madison looked around the room at all of us, seeing our expressions of shock and disgust at Richard's continued manipulation. "Richard, I want to postpone our wedding until we can sort out these medical and financial questions." "Postpone the wedding, Madison, that's completely unacceptable. We have over 100 guests expecting to attend our ceremony in 9 days. But if there are questions about my pregnancy and our family's financial compatibility—" "There are no questions, Madison. There are only problems created by your unstable sister, who's trying to destroy our relationship." Richard's voice was becoming cold and threatening in a way that made my skin crawl. "Madison, you need to choose right now between loyalty to your family and loyalty to our future together." "What does that mean?" "It means you either restore the wedding funding and exclude your sister from all future family decisions, or I'll be forced to reconsider whether this marriage can succeed." Madison looked at me with tears in her eyes, finally understanding that Richard's love was entirely conditional on her family's financial submission. "Richard, I need time to think about everything." "You don't have time to think, Madison. You have time to choose." And with that ultimatum, Madison finally heard the voice of a man who had never loved her at all. After Richard's threatening phone call, the atmosphere in my parents' living room felt like the calm before a devastating storm. Madison sat staring at her phone, finally understanding the true nature of the man she'd almost married. "He's going to come after our family now," she said quietly. "Richard doesn't handle rejection well, and we've just destroyed months of his planning." "What do you mean he's going to come after us?" Dad asked. "I mean, he's vindictive and he has resources. He's not going to just walk away quietly after we've exposed his criminal operation." Carmen had warned me about this possibility. Men like Richard became dangerous when their schemes were threatened, especially when they felt publicly humiliated. "Madison, what kind of threats has Richard made in the past?" I asked. "He mentioned that my motorcycle club friends could be portrayed as criminal associates if anyone ever questioned our relationship." "What else?" "He said Dad's employment history showed instability that could be used to discredit our family's credibility." I felt cold anger building in my chest. Richard had been systematically gathering ammunition to destroy our family's reputation if we ever opposed his plans. "Madison, we need to know everything Richard said about our family. Every threat, every piece of information he claimed to have, every way he suggested he could hurt us." Madison spent the next hour recounting months of subtle threats and manipulation tactics that Richard had disguised as protective concern. He documented her emotional moments during wedding planning. He'd photographed our family home and vehicles. He'd even researched our neighbors and family friends, looking for any information that could be used against us. "He's been building a comprehensive case to destroy our credibility," Madison realized. "If we'd tried to expose him after the wedding, he could have made us look like unstable criminal troublemakers. But now we have evidence of his criminal behavior," I pointed out. "Evidence that he'll claim is fabricated or illegally obtained." Carmen called while we were discussing our options. "Brisa, how did the conversation with Madison go?" "She finally understands the situation, but now we're worried about Richard's retaliation." "That's exactly what I was calling about. My contact at the police department told me something disturbing." "What?" "Richard filed a report this afternoon claiming that your family has been threatening and harassing him." My stomach dropped. "What kind of report?" He claims you've been stalking him, making threatening phone calls, and attempting to extort money from his family. That's completely false. I know it's false, but Richard provided documentation that appears to support his claims. What kind of documentation? Fake text messages, manipulated audio recordings, and witness statements from people who claim to have observed your threatening behavior. I felt like I was falling down a rabbit hole of criminal deception. Carmen, he's been planning this retaliation strategy all along. It gets worse, Brisa. Richard also filed a report claiming that Madison has been displaying erratic and potentially dangerous behavior, suggesting she might need psychiatric intervention. Madison grabbed the phone from my hands. Carmen, this is Madison. What did he say about me? He claims you've been having emotional breakdowns, making threats of self-harm, and showing signs of severe mental instability. But that's not true. Madison, I believe you completely, but Richard has documentation that appears to support his claims. What kind of documentation? Audio recordings of phone conversations where you're crying and talking about feeling hopeless. Photos of you looking distressed. Witness statements claiming you've been acting irrationally. Madison's face went white. He recorded our private conversations and took photos of me when I was upset about wedding stress. And now he's using that documentation to build a case that you're mentally unstable and your family is criminally threatening. I took the phone back. Carmen, what do we do? We build a stronger case against Richard faster than he can build a case against your family. How? I've been in contact with Richard's previous victims. Rebecca Patterson and Jennifer Hayes are willing to provide testimony about his criminal pattern. They'll help us. They've been waiting for someone to build a strong enough case to ensure Richard faces legal consequences. What can they provide? Financial records showing how Richard stole from their families, documentation of his manipulation tactics, evidence that he uses the same psychological abuse patterns against every victim. Carmen's voice became more urgent. But Brisa, we need to move quickly. Richard is already working to discredit your family's credibility. If we don't present our evidence soon, law enforcement might dismiss our claims as revenge tactics by people he's already portrayed as unstable. How long do we have? Maybe 48 hours before Richard's false narrative becomes established as truth. After hanging up, Madison and I spent the rest of the evening compiling every piece of evidence we had about Richard's deception. Financial records, recorded conversations, background investigations, and witness statements filled multiple folders. But I kept thinking about Richard's threat regarding my motorcycle club friends. He'd suggested they could be portrayed as criminal associates, which meant he'd been researching them as potential targets for character assassination. Madison, I need to warn Jake, Sophie, and Derek about Richard's potential retaliation. Who are Jake, Sophie, and Derek? Friends from my motorcycle club who were planning to attend your engagement party. Richard might try to create false evidence of criminal associations. I called Jake Martinez first. Jake was a decorated Army veteran who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan before returning home to work as a trauma therapist. Jake, I need to warn you about something serious. What's going on, Brisa? I explained the entire situation with Richard and his threats to portray my friends as criminal associates. So this guy is planning to claim that your motorcycle club friends are dangerous criminals, Jake asked. That's what Madison overheard. Brisa, I'm a licensed therapist with security clearance from my military service. Sophie is a nurse practitioner at Children's Hospital. Derek owns a successful construction company and volunteers with Habitat for Humanity. I know you're all upstanding citizens, Jake, but Richard specializes in manipulating perception and creating false narratives. What do you need from us? I need you to document your professional credentials and community involvement in case Richard tries to spread false information about your backgrounds. Jake was quiet for a moment. Brisa, what if we help you build a case against Richard instead of just defending ourselves? What do you mean? I mean, Sophie has connections in the medical community who might be interested in Richard's fake pregnancy manipulation. Derek has business connections who've probably dealt with Whitman Properties. and I have contacts in law enforcement who specialize in financial fraud cases. I felt a surge of hope. You'd all be willing to help. Brisa, this guy targeted your family for criminal exploitation. He manipulated your sister psychologically and tried to steal your parents' home. Of course, we're willing to help. After talking to Jake, I called Sophie Chen, who was working a night shift at the hospital. Sophie, I need to tell you about something that might affect you indirectly. Sophie listened to the entire story without interrupting, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated her analytical medical training. Brisa Richards' fake pregnancy manipulation is actually a form of medical fraud, she said when I finished. If he's been discouraging Madison from seeking actual medical care while claiming professional knowledge about pregnancy, he's practicing medicine without a license. Is that a serious criminal charge? Very serious, especially if he's been using false medical information to manipulate someone into marriage. Could you help document the medical fraud aspects of his behavior? I can connect you with colleagues who specialize in investigating medical malpractice and fraud. We take this kind of manipulation very seriously. Finally, I called Derek Williams, who owned Williams Construction. Derek, have you ever had business dealings with Whitman Properties? Unfortunately, yes. They owe my company $12,000 for work we completed 6 months ago. They haven't paid you. Richard Sr. keeps claiming there were quality issues with our work, but he won't specify what issues or allow us to address them. It's obvious they're just trying to avoid paying. Derek, would you be willing to provide testimony about Whitman Properties' fraudulent business practices? Absolutely. And Brisa, I know at least 4 other small businesses that have similar unpaid contracts with them. By midnight, I had commitments from Jake, Sophie, Derek, and several of their professional contacts to help build a comprehensive case against Richard and his family's criminal operation. But as I fell asleep that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was building his own case against us just as quickly. The question was, who would present their evidence to law enforcement first? The next morning, Carmen arrived at my apartment with 2 large boxes of additional evidence and a grim expression. Richard escalated his campaign against your family overnight. She announced setting the boxes on my kitchen table. What happened? He filed additional police reports claiming that you and your motorcycle friends have been conducting surveillance on him and his family. But we only observed him once at the restaurant. Richard claims you've been following him for weeks, taking photographs of his home and workplace, and making threats against his personal safety. Carmen opened the first box, revealing dozens of photographs and documents. He provided these to police as evidence of stalking behavior. I examined the photos with growing horror. They showed me outside the Whitman Properties building, Carmen and me at the country club, and even images of my motorcycle parked near locations Richard frequented. Carmen, how did he get these photos? He's been conducting counter-surveillance since the day you first visited his office. Counter-surveillance. Richard hired private investigators to document your activities while you were investigating his background. The implications hit me like a physical blow. So he knew we were building a case against him. He's known for days, and he's been systematically creating evidence to portray your investigation as criminal stalking. Carmen pulled out more documents from the box. It gets worse. Richard claims that your family has been attempting to extort money from his family by threatening to spread false rumors about his character. That's the exact opposite of what actually happened. I know, but Richard has documentation that appears to support his version of events. She showed me fake text messages purporting to be from Madison demanding money in exchange for silence about Richard's alleged criminal behavior. Madison never sent these messages. Of course she didn't, but they're sophisticated forgeries that would be difficult to prove false without extensive technical analysis. I felt overwhelmed by the scope of Richard's criminal operation. How are we supposed to fight someone who can create false evidence this convincingly? We fight back with overwhelming real evidence that exposes his pattern of criminal behavior across multiple victims. Carmen opened the second box. I spent all night coordinating with Richard's previous victims and their families. The box contained financial records, police reports, court documents, and witness statements from Rebecca Patterson and Jennifer Hayes' families. Rebecca's family kept detailed records of Richard's financial fraud, Carmen explained. Bank statements showing unauthorized transfers, forged documents, and attempts to access family business accounts. She pulled out another folder. Jennifer's family documented Richard's psychological manipulation tactics, recorded phone conversations where he threatens to harm himself if she leaves him evidence of him spreading false rumors about her mental health, and witness statements about his controlling behavior. This proves Richard's pattern of criminal behavior. But we also have new evidence about his current operation against your family. Carmen showed me financial records indicating that Richard had borrowed significant amounts of money against the expectation of accessing Madison's family assets through marriage. He owes over $80,000 to various creditors, including some very dangerous people. Dangerous how loan sharks, underground gambling operations, and private lenders who don't operate through traditional legal channels. I felt sick realizing how much danger Madison had been in. So Richard wasn't just planning to steal our money for profit. He was planning to steal it to pay off criminal debts. And if he couldn't access your family's money through marriage, he'd need to find alternative ways to pay these debts. Like framing our family for crimes and suing us for damages. Exactly. Richard's false police reports aren't just about discrediting your family. They're the foundation for a lawsuit claiming that your harassment and threats damaged his reputation and caused financial losses. Carmen pulled out one final document. This is a draft lawsuit Richard's attorney prepared claiming $200,000 in damages for alleged harassment, stalking, and defamation. I stared at the legal document in disbelief. He's planning to sue us for exposing his criminal behavior. It's a sophisticated extortion scheme. Richard creates false evidence of criminal behavior by your family, then offers to drop the charges and lawsuits in exchange for financial compensation. How many families has he done this to? Based on our investigation, at least 6 families over the past 3 years. And they've all paid him. Most of them have paid rather than fight lengthy legal battles against fabricated evidence. The scope of Richard's criminal enterprise was staggering. He wasn't just a con man targeting individual women. He was running a systematic operation designed to financially destroy entire families. Carmen, what do we do? We present all of this evidence to law enforcement and prosecutor's office simultaneously before Richard can establish his false narrative as accepted truth. Will they believe us? With this much documentation across multiple victims, they'll have to take our claims seriously. Carmen began organizing all the evidence into chronological order. But Brisa, you need to understand that once we present this evidence, Richard will know that his criminal operation has been exposed. What does that mean? It means he'll become desperate and dangerous. Men like Richard don't go to prison quietly. You think he might try to hurt Madison or our family? I think he might try anything to avoid facing the legal consequences of his crimes. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Madison's number appeared on the screen. Brisa, you need to come over here right now, Madison said, her voice shaking with fear. What's wrong? Richard is here at Mom and Dad's house. He's demanding to speak with all of us together about resolving our family misunderstanding. Madison, don't let him into the house. He's already inside. Mom let him in before I could stop her. We're on our way. As Carmen and I gathered all the evidence boxes, I realized that Richard had decided to confront our family directly, rather than wait for his legal strategy to unfold, which meant the most dangerous phase of this situation was just beginning. When Carmen and I arrived at my parents' house, we found Richard sitting in our living room like he owned the place, speaking to my family in a calm, reasonable tone that made my skin crawl. Brisa, Carmen, please join us, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I think we can resolve all these unfortunate misunderstandings if we communicate openly and honestly. Madison sat curled in the corner of the couch, looking terrified. Mom and Dad appeared confused and intimidated by Richard's confident demeanor. "What are you doing here, Richard?" I asked. "I'm here to discuss how we can put this unpleasantness behind us and move forward as a family." "There is no family, Richard. Madison called off the wedding." Madison was understandably upset about the vendor cancellations, but I'm sure we can work through those temporary setbacks. Richard's voice remained perfectly controlled, but I could see rage simmering behind his eyes. "Madison, would you like to tell Richard what you discovered yesterday?" I asked. Madison looked at me with pleading eyes, clearly afraid of Richard's reaction. "Madison learned that she's not actually pregnant," I continued. "She took a pregnancy test that came back negative." Richard's mask of composure slipped for just a moment. Home pregnancy tests are notoriously unreliable early in pregnancy. "Richard, you convinced Madison she was pregnant to pressure her into marriage." "That's an absurd accusation, Brisa." Carmen stepped forward with our boxes of evidence. "We have recorded audio of you admitting to manipulating Madison about her pregnancy. Any recordings obtained through illegal surveillance would be inadmissible in court. But they're not inadmissible in the court of public opinion." Richard's eyes narrowed as he looked at the evidence boxes. "What exactly do you think you have there?" "We have documentation of your criminal activities spanning multiple victims over several years." "Criminal activities? I think you've been watching too many detective shows, Brisa." Carmen opened the first box and pulled out the financial records from Richard's previous victims. "We have bank statements showing how you stole money from Rebecca Patterson's family. Rebecca and I had a business disagreement that was resolved privately. We have court documents showing how you attempted to forge access to Jennifer Hayes' family assets. Jennifer's family misunderstood some financial planning discussions." Carmen continued pulling out evidence. "We have witness statements from 6 different families describing identical patterns of manipulation and theft." Richard stood up slowly, his composure finally cracking. "You've been very busy, haven't you, ladies?" "We've been protecting our family from a predator." "Protecting your family?" Richard laughed coldly. "You've been stalking me, harassing my family, and fabricating evidence to support delusional conspiracy theories. The only thing delusional here is your belief that you could steal from our family and get away with it." Richard pulled out his phone and started recording. "I want everyone in this room to witness that Brisa Collins is making false accusations against me and my family. Go ahead and record Richard. We want documentation of this conversation too." Carmen was also recording on her phone while simultaneously texting someone. "Richard." Madison said quietly, "I know you've been lying to me about everything." Richard's attention snapped to Madison with frightening intensity. "Madison, sweetheart, you're confused and upset. These people are filling your head with paranoid fantasies. I heard the recording of you discussing plans to manipulate my pregnancy and steal my family's money." "That recording is fabricated, Madison. Audio can be easily manipulated with computer software. Even if the recording is fake, you still convinced me I was pregnant when I wasn't." Richard moved closer to Madison, his voice becoming soft and threatening. "Madison, you need to be very careful about the accusations you make. False statements about someone's character can have serious legal consequences." "Are you threatening my sister?" I asked. "I'm advising her about the legal ramifications of defamation." Carmen's phone buzzed with a response to her text message. She looked at it and smiled. "Richard, I think you should know that representatives from the district attorney's office are on their way here to review our evidence." Richard's face went completely white. "You called the police?" "We called the prosecutor's office that handles financial fraud cases." Without allowing me to present my side of the story, "Your side of the story is well documented in our evidence files." Richard looked around the room like a trapped animal, realizing that his carefully planned operation had been completely exposed. "This is harassment," he said, his voice rising. "You've invaded my privacy, conducted illegal surveillance, and now you're attempting to have me falsely arrested. We've documented your criminal behavior and reported it to appropriate authorities. The doorbell rang and Dad went to answer it. Two people in business suits introduced themselves as investigators from the district attorney's office. "Miss Rodriguez," the female investigator asked, "we received your call about financial fraud allegations." "Yes, we have comprehensive evidence of a multi-family fraud operation spanning several years." The investigators looked around the room, taking note of Richard's presence and the boxes of evidence. "Mr. Whitman, I presume," the male investigator said. Richard straightened his shoulders and attempted to regain his composure. "Yes, and I want to report that this family has been stalking and harassing me for weeks. We're aware of your police report, sir. We're here to review evidence from all parties involved." Carmen began presenting our documentation systematically. Financial records recorded conversations, witness statements, and pattern analysis that clearly demonstrated Richard's criminal operation. As the evidence mounted, Richard's attempts to maintain his innocent facade became increasingly desperate. "These people are clearly mentally unstable," he insisted. "They fabricated this entire conspiracy theory because they can't accept that their daughter isn't good enough for my family." Madison stood up suddenly. "Richard, stop lying. I know what you did to me, and I know what you plan to do to my family." "Madison, you're having an emotional breakdown. You need professional help." "The only help I need is protection from you." The female investigator looked up from reviewing our evidence. "Mr. Whitman, these allegations are quite serious. We're going to need to conduct a formal interview with you at our office." "I'm not answering any questions without my attorney present." "That's certainly your right, sir." As Richard prepared to leave, he turned back to Madison one final time. "Madison, when you realize what a mistake you've made, when you understand how these people have manipulated you into destroying your own future, don't expect me to welcome you back." "Richard," Madison said quietly, "I already understand exactly what kind of mistake I almost made." After Richard left with threats of lawsuits and countercharges, the investigators spent 2 more hours reviewing our evidence and interviewing each family member about our experiences. When they finally finished, the female investigator looked at Carmen with professional respect. "Miss Rodriguez, this is one of the most comprehensive fraud investigations we've ever received from civilian sources. Will there be criminal charges?" I asked. "Based on the evidence you've presented, we'll be pursuing multiple felony charges against Mr. Whitman and potentially his family members." As the investigators left with copies of all our evidence, I felt a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. We had exposed Richard's criminal operation and protected our family from financial destruction. But I knew that men like Richard didn't surrender quietly, and his threats of retaliation were probably just beginning. 2 days after the DA investigators left with our evidence, I received an unexpected phone call that changed everything. "Miss Collins, this is Eleanor Whitman." I nearly dropped the phone. "Mrs. Whitman, I wonder if we might arrange a private conversation. There are some matters regarding my son that I believe we should discuss." "I'm not sure what we would have to discuss, Mrs. Whitman." "I think you might be surprised, Miss Collins." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet Eleanor Whitman at a neutral coffee shop downtown. Carmen insisted on accompanying me, convinced this was some kind of trap or attempt at intimidation. Eleanor arrived exactly on time, looking impeccably dressed, but somehow diminished from the confident woman I'd observed at the country club. She sat down across from us with careful dignity. "Miss Collins, Miss Rodriguez, I want to begin by apologizing for my family's inexcusable behavior toward your family." I stared at her in shock. "I'm sorry, what?" "I said I want to apologize. Our treatment of you and your family has been reprehensible." Carmen leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitman, we have recordings of you discussing plans to manipulate Madison and steal money from their family. I'm aware of those recordings. They represent the most shameful moments of my life." Eleanor's voice was steady, but I could see tears forming in her eyes. "Miss Collins, I need you to understand that my husband and I were also victims of Richard's manipulation." "What do you mean?" "We thought Richard's marriage plans were legitimate. We believed he was genuinely in love with Madison and wanted to build a life with her. But the recordings capture conversations where Richard convinced us that your family was trying to take advantage of our wealth. He told us you were social climbers who would exploit our generosity and eventually demand more and more financial support. I felt confused by this unexpected turn. So you didn't know about Richard's criminal plans? We knew Richard had financial difficulties, but he told us they were temporary setbacks caused by bad business investments. We had no idea he was systematically targeting families for theft. Eleanor pulled out a folder of documents. After your family exposed Richard's operation, my husband and I hired our own investigators to examine Richard's activities. She slid the folder across the table to Carmen. We discovered that Richard has been stealing from our family accounts for over 2 years. Carmen opened the folder and examined bank statements, showing unauthorized transfers totaling over $150,000. Richard was using our family credit accounts to pay off gambling debts and personal loans, Eleanor continued. He forged our signatures on documents and used our business connections to establish credibility for his fraud operations. You had no idea this was happening. Richard is extremely skilled at manipulation and deception. He convinced us that any financial discrepancies were caused by accounting errors or business fluctuations. Eleanor's voice became more emotional. Miss Collins, when we listened to those recordings you provided to investigators, we realized that our own son had been using us as accessories to his criminal activities. What are you saying, Mrs. Whitman? I'm saying that my husband and I want to help you ensure that Richard faces full legal consequences for his crimes. Carmen and I exchanged incredulous looks. You want to help prosecute your own son? Our son is a criminal who has destroyed multiple families and brought shame to our family name. He needs to be stopped before he hurts more people. Eleanor pulled out additional documents. My husband and I are prepared to provide complete financial records showing Richard's theft from our accounts. We're also willing to testify about his manipulation tactics and his pattern of lying to family members. Why would you do that? Because it's the right thing to do, and because we want to make amends for the terrible way we treated your family. Eleanor's next words shocked me even more. Miss Collins, my family owes you a significant debt of gratitude. Your investigation exposed Richard's criminal behavior before he could steal even more money from us or destroy more innocent families. Mrs. Whitman, you called my family trashy and inappropriate for your social circle. I said things I deeply regret based on lies Richard told us about your family's character and intentions. Eleanor leaned forward with sincere intensity. Miss Collins, I've spent the past 2 days learning about your family. Your father is a hard-working man who's never missed a day of work in 20 years. Your mother volunteers at the food bank and tutors children at the community center. You work as a skilled mechanic and saved $10,000 to help your sister's wedding. She paused, gathering herself. My family has more money than we know what to do with, but we don't have the kind of character and integrity your family demonstrates every day. I felt tears forming in my own eyes. Mrs. Whitman, you don't need to. Yes, I do need to say this. I need you to understand that everything my family said about your social class was wrong and shameful. Eleanor pulled out one more document. Miss Collins, I want to ask if your family would consider accepting our financial support for pursuing criminal charges against Richard. What kind of financial support? Legal fees, investigation costs, and compensation for the money you've already lost due to Richard's fraud. Carmen studied the document Eleanor had provided. Mrs. Whitman, this is a substantial amount of money. It's the least we can do to help repair the damage Richard has caused. I looked at Eleanor Whitman, seeing genuine remorse and determination in her expression. Mrs. Whitman, what about your husband? Is he also willing to testify against Richard? My husband is devastated by Richard's criminal behavior. He's prepared to do whatever is necessary to ensure justice is served. And you understand that testifying against Richard might result in serious prison time for your son? Eleanor's voice became firm and resolute. Miss Collins, Richard is 29 years old. He's had every advantage in life, every opportunity to make good choices. Instead, he chose to become a criminal who destroys innocent families. She looked directly into my eyes. If Richard goes to prison, it's because of his own actions, not because of our testimony. As Carmen and I left that meeting, I realized that exposing Richard's criminal operation had created an unexpected alliance with the very people I'd initially seen as enemies. Eleanor Whitman's willingness to testify against her own son and provide financial support for his prosecution would make our case against Richard virtually unbeatable. But more importantly, her genuine remorse about our family's treatment had begun healing wounds I didn't even realize needed healing. Sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected sources. 6 months later, I sat in a packed courtroom watching Richard James Whitman Jr. receive a sentence of 8 years in federal prison for fraud, theft, and conspiracy charges spanning 7 different families over 3 years. The evidence Carmen and I had compiled, combined with Eleanor and Richard Sr.'s testimony about their son's theft from their own accounts, had created an overwhelming case that Richard's defense attorney couldn't challenge. During the trial, we learned the full scope of Richard's criminal enterprise. He had systematically targeted middle-class families with accessible assets, manipulated vulnerable women into rushed marriages, and stolen over $400,000 through various fraud schemes. Rebecca Patterson and Jennifer Hayes had testified about Richard's psychological manipulation tactics, providing crucial evidence about his pattern of isolating victims from their support systems and creating false pregnancies to pressure marriage decisions. Most importantly, Madison had testified about her own experience with courage and clarity that helped the jury understand how sophisticated psychological manipulation could make intelligent people vulnerable to criminal exploitation. The defendant used my pregnancy fears and my family's desire for social advancement to manipulate us into funding our own financial destruction, Madison had told the court. He convinced me that my own family was an embarrassment while simultaneously stealing money my parents had borrowed against their home. The judge had been particularly harsh in her sentencing statement. Mr. Whitman, your crimes represent a particularly heinous form of family destruction that goes far beyond simple theft. You systematically targeted families' deepest emotional bonds and turned their love for each other into weapons against their own financial security. She had continued, your manipulation of pregnancy fears and social anxieties demonstrates a level of psychological cruelty that demands significant incarceration to protect other potential victims. But the legal victory was only part of our family's healing process. Eleanor Whitman had kept her promise to help repair the damage Richard had caused. She'd provided financial support that allowed my parents to pay off their home equity loan, immediately protecting their house from any risk of foreclosure. She'd also established a foundation that helps families investigate potential partners' backgrounds and provides resources for people escaping manipulative relationships. Miss Collins. Eleanor had told me after the sentencing, your family's courage in exposing Richard's criminal behavior saved my family from complete financial ruin and protected countless future victims from his schemes. Mrs. Whitman, you didn't have to create an entire foundation to help other families. Yes, I did. My family's wealth means nothing if we don't use it to prevent the kind of harm my son inflicted on innocent people. The foundation had already helped 12 families escape similar fraud operations, providing both financial resources and emotional support for victims of romantic manipulation scams. Madison's recovery from Richard's psychological abuse had been gradual but steady. She'd worked with Jake Martinez, who specialized in helping people heal from manipulative relationships, and had slowly rebuilt her confidence and independence. Brisa. I keep thinking about how close I came to destroying our entire family, she'd told me recently. If you hadn't fought for the truth, I would have married Richard and watched him systematically steal everything our parents had worked for. Madison, you were targeted by a professional criminal. None of what happened was your fault. But I almost chose him over my own family. You almost chose what you thought was security for your future child. That's understandable, even if the situation was based on lies. Madison had eventually found genuine love with someone who appreciated our family's values and treated our parents with respect and affection. Her wedding the following year had been a celebration of real love and authentic family bonds. Sophie Chen had used her medical connections to ensure that Richard's fake pregnancy manipulation tactics were documented as evidence for other fraud investigations. Her work had helped identify similar cases where men had used false medical information to control and manipulate romantic partners. Derek Williams had recovered the $12,000 that Whitman Properties owed his construction company, and his testimony had helped other small businesses pursue claims against the Whitman family's fraudulent business practices. Even Richard Sr. had faced consequences for his complicity in his son's criminal operation. Though he avoided criminal charges due to his cooperation with investigators, his business reputation had been severely damaged by revelations about Whitman Properties' pattern of cheating contractors and employees. Carmen had been offered a position with the district attorney's office based on her investigative work on Richard's case. Her systematic approach to documenting financial fraud had impressed prosecutors who dealt with similar crimes. "Brisa, you realize what you did, don't you?" Carmen had asked me after the trial concluded. "What do you mean?" "You saved your family from financial ruin, protected your sister from an abusive marriage, and exposed a criminal operation that was destroying other families." "We saved our family, Carmen. I couldn't have done any of this without your help." "But you made the choice to fight back when it would have been easier to just accept the situation." As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that standing up to Richard's criminal operation had taught me something important about family loyalty and personal courage. Sometimes protecting the people you love requires making difficult choices that temporarily damage relationships. Sometimes fighting for truth means risking everything you care about. But when criminal predators target your family, the cost of fighting back is always less than the cost of surrender. Madison was safe. Our parents' home was secure. Richard was in prison where he couldn't hurt other families. And our family bonds had been strengthened by surviving a crisis that could have destroyed us. Justice had been served not just through legal consequences, but through the restoration of truth and the protection of innocent people from a dangerous predator. 1 year after Richard's sentencing, I stood in the backyard of our family home watching Madison dance with her new husband at their real wedding celebration. This time, the joy was authentic, the love was genuine, and every guest was there because they truly cared about Madison's happiness. The difference between this celebration and the elaborate deception Richard had planned was like comparing sunlight to artificial fluorescent lighting. Everything felt warm, natural, and filled with real emotion. Eleanor Whitman approached me during the reception looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. "Miss Collins, I wanted to thank you again for everything your family has done." "Mrs. Whitman, you don't need to keep thanking us." "Yes, I do. Your courage in exposing Richard's criminal behavior didn't just save your own family, it saved mine too." Eleanor looked around at the celebration, watching my parents laugh with Madison's new in-laws and seeing the genuine warmth between all the families present. "This is what a real family celebration looks like," she observed. "Not the manufactured social theater Richard had planned." "How are you and Mr. Whitman doing now?" "We're learning to rebuild our family reputation through genuine community service rather than social pretension. The foundation has given us purpose beyond just accumulating wealth." Eleanor had asked to contribute to Madison's real wedding celebration, but our families had politely declined. This wedding was funded through love and reasonable planning rather than desperation and deception. "Miss Collins, I've learned something important over the past year." "What's that, Mrs. Whitman?" "I've learned that character isn't determined by social class wealth or family connections. It's determined by how people treat each other when they're under pressure." Eleanor looked toward my parents who were helping clean up after the dinner service without being asked. Your family demonstrated more character during our crisis than my family had shown in decades of social prominence. Mrs. Whitman, people make mistakes when they're scared or confused. What matters is how we learn and grow from those experiences. You're very generous to forgive our behavior, Miss Collins. Forgiveness isn't generous, Mrs. Whitman. It's necessary for healing. As the evening continued, I found myself reflecting on how dramatically our family dynamics had changed over the past year. Madison had grown stronger and more independent after healing from Richard's psychological manipulation. She'd learned to trust her own judgment while remaining open to family input and support. Our parents had learned to value their daughters based on character and integrity rather than social achievements or marriage prospects. I had learned that fighting for truth and family loyalty sometimes requires taking enormous risks, but those risks are always worthwhile when the stakes involve protecting people you love. The investigation into Richard's criminal operation had also led me to discover a new career path. The skills I'd developed researching financial fraud and documenting criminal behavior had attracted attention from the district attorney's office. I was now working part-time as a financial investigation specialist while maintaining my mechanic work, helping families avoid similar predatory schemes. Brisa. Madison said, finding me during a quiet moment in the evening, "I need to tell you something important." "What is it?" "I need you to know that you saved my life." "Madison, you don't need to." "Yes, I do need to say this. Richard wasn't just planning to steal our money. He was planning to isolate me completely from my family, make me believe I was mentally unstable, and control every aspect of my life." Madison's voice became emotional. "If you hadn't fought for the truth, I would have spent years in an abusive marriage wondering why I felt crazy and why my family had abandoned me. Madison, you would have figured out his deception eventually." "Maybe. But by then he would have destroyed our family financially and convinced me that I deserved the abuse." Madison hugged me tightly. "You risked everything to save me from a man who would have destroyed my life. You're the best sister anyone could ask for." As the celebration wound down and families began saying their goodbyes, I realized that our experience with Richard had taught us something valuable about the nature of family bonds. True family loyalty isn't about blindly supporting each other's choices. It's about being willing to fight for each other's well-being, even when that means challenging decisions or confronting difficult truths. Sometimes love requires saying no. Sometimes protection requires causing temporary pain. Sometimes saving someone means risking the relationship itself. Eleanor Whitman had been right about character being revealed under pressure. Our family had faced a crisis that could have destroyed us financially and emotionally, but instead, we'd emerged stronger and more united. Richard had tried to exploit our family's desire for social advancement and our love for each other, but those same bonds of love had ultimately protected us from his criminal manipulation. As I helped my parents clean up after the celebration, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "Brisa, I'm proud of the woman you've become." "Thanks, Dad." "Not just because of how you handled the situation with Richard, though that took tremendous courage." "Then why?" "Because you've learned that being part of a family means protecting each other from danger, even when that danger comes disguised as opportunity." Dad looked toward Madison and her new husband, who were laughing together while organizing leftover flowers. "You understood that Madison's happiness was more important than her wedding, and that her safety was more important than her social aspirations." "I just did what any sister would do, Dad." "No, sweetheart. You did what a sister with wisdom, courage, and unshakable family loyalty would do." As I drove home that evening, I thought about the life lesson our family had learned through this difficult experience. When criminal predators target your family, the response isn't to hide or hope the problem goes away. The response is to gather allies, document evidence, and fight back with everything you have. When people try to exploit your family's love and loyalty as weaknesses, you prove that those same bonds are actually your greatest sources of strength. And when society tries to convince you that wealth and social status determine your worth, you remember that character and integrity are the only measures that truly matter. Our family had started this journey believing that social advancement would bring happiness and security. We'd learned instead that happiness and security come from truth, mutual respect, and unwavering loyalty to each other. Richard Whitman Jr. had tried to destroy our family by turning our love into a weapon against ourselves. Instead, he'd taught us that our love for each other was powerful enough to overcome any criminal scheme designed to tear us apart. Have you ever had to choose between supporting a family member's happiness and protecting them from danger? Sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is say no to something that seems wonderful on the surface, but threatens the people we care about most. Family loyalty isn't about saying yes to everything. It's about having the courage to fight for what's right, even when it's difficult. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and subscribe for more stories about family courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for listening, and remember, your family bonds are stronger than any scheme designed to break them apart. Stay safe, trust your instincts, and never stop fighting for the people you love.